Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll begin. I just want to share my screen quickly. Okay, share this first. Okay, just a reminder for those of you that have not seen my latest announcement with the new updated PACER. So the updated PACER now has your assignment dates linked to it. So assignment 1 due on the 2nd of April 2025, and then assignment 2 due on the 9th of May 2025. I have included it here at the bottom as well. You will notice here that your ICE task 1 is due on the 12th of March. I have loaded that already on ARC. I created a timeline for 7 p.m. when it would be visible for you to start working on it, because the ICE Task 1 is covering more on the content on Learning Unit 2, Theme 1 and 2. So I want to conclude that first before you get cracking on the ICE Task 1. Your assignment, it is available under student material. So make sure you go under student material, put in this module code. So LSCM5121W, because you are distance learning or online. And then you will see assignment 1 and assignment 2 already preloaded there. So please make sure you at least get that going. I have shared on the group chat how to navigate ARC. There is a YouTube channel that's available on how you can go ahead and get your assignment submitted once it's completed, as well as your ICE task. So I think use your ICE task as your sort of trial and error for your assignment. I am very flexible when it comes to ICE task. I give you the due date as a soft due date. It doesn't mean you shouldn't submit it on the due date, but I do allow for a few extensions. There is a sort of hard due date, which I will share with you as our semester unravels. However, try and stick to the dates as much as possible, because a lot of the ICE task is what you would be using in your assignment as well. So just make sure you get that, you have a look at that. So if there's any questions during the session, please just unmute yourself, ask me the relevant questions that you need to. I unfortunately do not have 2 screens today, so I cannot see if anyone puts their hand up or puts in any questions in the chat box. So just unmute yourself and then we can answer as many questions as possible. So far, is there any questions? Okay. I'm just going to share the slides quickly. So today, under Learning Unit 2, Theme 1 and 2, we are going into sourcing. So it'll be a bit of an introduction into sourcing, the drivers, as well as any sort of factors that contribute towards how you would source suppliers specifically. And then Theme 2, we're going into more into supplier selection, sort of KPIs that drive that. And then, your ICE task is based on this learning unit specifically. So please just try and pay attention as much as possible so we can run through it. Okay, so the first one is strategic sourcing. So with strategic sourcing, when we look or we try and understand what strategic sourcing is and the role that it plays in supply chain specifically, strategic sourcing is basically a process within supply chain where we analyze a lot about the business's purchasing needs and how they can develop a strategy to meet those needs in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. So as you go through supply chain, logistics, operations, you will see that there's certain keywords that will often pop up. Number 1 is effective, efficiency, cost saving. You want to do as much as from an optimization perspective. So how better way can we optimize the supply chain? And one of it is through strategic sourcing. So traditionally, sourcing focuses on anything that's sort of like short-term transactions and price-based decisions. So you'll see a lot of businesses, especially if we have to look at it from a logistics perspective, when they source suppliers, they try and do a sort of horse trading with suppliers, where they would send out a specific RFQ or RFP, and they would have all of your details, on that specific RFP, and then you would have to now come in and put either a solution in place, something that can optimize their supply chain from a logistics perspective, or price. Once they shortlist you as part of the RFP, they either keep 2 or 3 suppliers onboarded, and every time they have a new shipment, let's say it's a sea freight shipment or an air freight shipment, they send that specific cost estimate through to all 2 or 3 suppliers. And then based on that, it's the person or the supplier that can get it here the fastest, so more efficiently, as well as from a price perspective, it made sense for them to go down that route. So some of the criteria that, contribute towards strategic sourcing is supplier relationship management. You want to be able to build and maintain a very strong relationship with your suppliers, so that you have long-term collaboration. You want to be able to, if for instance you are in a predicament, and let's just not talk about it from a logistics perspective, but let's say from a raw material sourcing perspective, you now have higher demand than what's expected, you didn't forecast your raw materials correctly, and you now need raw materials to be sourced as quickly as possible. By having that long-term relationship with key suppliers, you are able to make that call, and your supplier is able to drive it. And then you have your raw materials now delivered to you as quickly as possible, so that you have business continuity at the end of the day. So having that supplier relationship is very important for any business. And that's the reason why you have fully fledged procurement departments. These departments are, especially if you're a big organizations, these departments are there to maintain that supplier relationship. So if and when you do require something that is quite urgent, so that you don't have any line stoppages, you can reach out to the supplier, and the procurement department is able to initiate it. So, by having a close relationship, you can initiate a lot of things like improving your quality. So if you receive bad quality on your last order, you now have an open sort of door policy with your supplier, where you're able to say to them, you know what, the quality wasn't good this time. Let's fix this, let's fix that. Just so that the next round, we get, better raw materials or better semi-finished goods. You're able to reduce costs by keeping, let's say, for instance, you now picked one supplier, you now have economies of scale with them, which means that your price per unit then becomes a lot cheaper, because you're now facilitating your entire order through to this one supplier. Similarly, from a logistics perspective, if you use 2 or 3 different suppliers, you're now splitting your volumes amongst 2 or 3 different suppliers. The pricing that you now get back from those suppliers is based on the volumes that they're getting. If you are keeping all of your volumes with one specific supplier, they're able to reduce that cost, quite drastically, because they're now getting all of your volume. So economies of scale does relate to basically every part of the business, and strategically sourcing those suppliers makes a big difference. You also can drive a lot from an innovation perspective. So ensuring that the business itself allows for, if there is any change, whether a supplier introduced a new technology, the new technology allows for either a finished good or a raw material to be produced a lot quicker. So whatever sort of innovation you think that the supplier can drive, the supplier would be able to drive, because you are now pushing all of your volume through to them. Okay, the next one is your total cost of ownership. And with total cost of ownership, you're not just considering the purchase price of that particular good or service. You are using all associated costs, whether it's logistics, whether it's maintenance, whether it's any sort of disposal that you have, so that you can understand what the true cost is for the entire life cycle. So understanding what the total cost of ownership is very important, because you're able to then source your supplier to the best possible way that you can, and you know where your thresholds are going to be. Market analysis. So understanding the supply market, it means that you include the different forces of supply and demand. So you can make a lot more better decisions, so more informed decisions about sourcing strategies, whether it means evaluating any sort of risks that you see, like your supplier may not be stable. So you need to understand from a market perspective, how is your supplier doing? Hello Peter is not the best option, believe me, because people only complain they don't give compliments. So understanding and doing as much market analysis as possible, whether it's researching that particular supplier, maybe by word of mouth or referrals, speaking to people that use that particular supplier does work well. Also, understanding the market trends. So for instance, if it is, let's say, it's a seasonality demand, or it's festive season or a specific holiday, you need to understand if it is peak. Can your supplier now withstand your volume? Whether it's from a production, manufacturing, or a logistics perspective, is that supplier then able to understand how they're going to carry your increase in demand? So understanding that from a market analysis does help. A lot of suppliers need to have scalable solutions where they scale it up when it comes to peak periods, and they can bring it back to normality when it's normal season. Then we have a spend analysis. So, reviewing sort of historically what the spending data is, so that you can identify if there's any cost savings, and this comes with volume versus price as well. So if you look at historic data, and let's pull it back into a logistics space. Let's say, for instance, you used a previous supplier and you moved 100 shipments with the supplier in a month, in a 1 month period. So you're now looking at historic data. You need to understand where the costings are sitting, and understand where you would like your costing to sit. So if you now want it at 100 Rand per shipment, for instance, to move it from point A to point B, that's what you need to negotiate with the supplier. You can also negotiate better terms. So for instance, sort of industry-wide, a lot of customers go on a 30-day payment terms. But if, for instance, you're in, like, let's say the textile industry, and you pay or you receive payment from your suppliers in 60 days, there's no way that you can pay your suppliers in 30 days, because you're going to have a massive cash flow issue. So understanding where your customers are sitting at from a payment term perspective, and negotiate that better payment term with your supplier. And again, if you have a good supplier relationship, you are then able to negotiate these sorts of terms. The next one is risk management. So identify any sort of potential risks within your supply chain, and how can you best mitigate it? What strategies can you put forward so you can best mitigate these risks? So it means maybe you are diversifying your suppliers. Sometimes it does come into play where you have a supplier for, let's say, 10 years, and your supplier gets very comfortable being your supplier for 10 years. They end up giving you a price increase every solitary year, and that's now 10 price increases. So in the market itself, you aren't getting the most favorable options. So you now have to go out and into market to relook at pricing, whether it's from a supplier of raw material or logistics or warehousing or whatever it may be as the different components of supply chain. It's understanding how best you can mitigate the risk that you currently are sitting at, whether it's a cost risk or a supplier risk. It's understanding what is your contingency plan. So going back out to market, understanding whether you are in the best possible space when it comes to costings, and solution and supply chain. That's where you need to be. And then the last one is sustainability and ethics. So ensuring that your sort of sourcing decisions aligns with the business's values, the business's ethics, as well as their sustainability processing. So when you're going through a sourcing process, you want to make sure that you don't have, if your requirement is, let's say, a triple B level 2, you're not going in and getting somebody that's a level 5. You also need to understand that they are, whether they VAT registers, whether they have, up-to-date CIPRO documents, those sort of things. You don't want to source a supplier that's your uncle's friend, basically. So it's just understanding where the ethics of the business is sitting and how well or how best you can actually source any sort of suppliers that can contribute towards it. Okay, any questions so far? I mean, this is just an introduction into where sourcing is. Okay. The next one is when we look at outsourcing. So making or buying decisions, okay? So outsourcing basically is purchasing any sort of material or components or even a service from suppliers instead of you doing it in-house. So when it comes to outsourcing, you are basically contracting out your business that you probably either previously performed and it just didn't make any financial sense to you, and you're now looking at outsourcing it or giving it to somebody who is better equipped, probably does this in economies of scale, and would probably do it better and cheaper than what you currently are doing. So there is a lot of pros and cons to outsourcing, and we'll run through it as we go along the slides. But some of the drivers of outsourcing is, number one, is a cost consideration. Cost is obviously a big component to any business. So cost is obviously one of the most important reasons for outsourcing, especially if your suppliers, they supply sort of components or any sort of material that are sort of non-essential to your business or to your operations, or doesn't give you a competitive advantage. Meaning, if you are a business that sells clothing, for instance, it doesn't make sense for you to insource 500 trucks for you to deliver that clothing. So it makes sense for you to outsource the transport element or the logistics element. If you are, let's leave it back at the clothing industry or the textile industry, if you feel that it's the landed cost or the total cost of ownership makes sense for you to import it as a finished good, as opposed to having seamstress in-house to manufacture it and do final checks on it, it doesn't make sense. So you would look at an outsourcing option. So you need something that's going to give you a competitive advantage. So it's very common for, like, if a business has like generic suppliers or generic materials, where your supplier may have a better advantage or better economies of scale for them to rather produce it as opposed to you. Okay, the next one is limited facility. So if you have a lack of production capacity because you don't have the facilities to produce it, it could also lead to an outsourcing decision. It can happen when your sort of demand grows a lot faster than what you've anticipated, and your expansion strategy is not speaking the same as what your demand is speaking. You then fail to meet that demand of your customers. So you then require an outsourcing option to go forward. So the business basically would buy sort of parts or components of parts so that it frees up some capacity within the current facility. And you can focus on stuff or focus on sort of important elements of the business that allows for your component to be fully manufactured or become a finished product. The next one is lack of expertise. So a lot of times you probably don't have the complete full expertise or the specialized facility or ability to make up a component or a specific product or move the product. So you then require it to be outsourced. So you need research efforts from suppliers to basically speak to you and tell you, okay, this is the best way forward. They are specialists in that specific component manufacturing or transport element. So they would come speak to you and tell you, okay, this is the way we see it going forward. It links up with your supply chain and where you want it to go. Therefore, it makes sense for you to then outsource this ability. The next one is core business. So basically, if it's not a primary function or a primary activity within your organization that generates you revenue. So you basically would like within your business to concentrate on core business activities. It makes more of a strategic decision than you focusing on stuff that actually is not part of your core. And just allow it to be outsourced, the stuff that's not your core business or non-core activities. And then the last one is quality. So an organization may take advantage.
Sorry.
Yes.
Can I ask quickly on the core business side, right? So let's
Yes.
say, for instance, an example will be I'm starting an import-export business. So I'm outsourcing my financials to the people that do my tax, my daily stuff. So the only thing that I'm basically doing is actually just sharing my information all over, and I'm just staying operational. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So that's exactly what it is. It's like you have a financial company or an accountant that would do everything financial for you. And you just focus on your core business, which is the import-export operational part of it.
Okay,
so I think every business basically has a core function and a core business, and a huge portion of that is outsourced. So I'll give you another example of this. So big corporates like FMCGs, for instance. I'm a supplier of an FMCG and I do the transport for them. I basically liaise with this FMCG business to do the operational element of it. So whether it's moving a product from point A to point B, when it comes to me getting payment from the FMCG, it's not their business anymore. It now becomes their outsourced party's business. So I then send my invoice with a PO that I get from the FMCG business to, let's say, the UK or to India or wherever it is. They then process it according to the PO that's generated, and then they will facilitate the payment to me. So that's basically how it works. Their focus is just on stuff that they can control. If it just doesn't make sense for them to control it, they outsource it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. The next one is, well, I spoke about quality. So they'll obviously take advantage of different suppliers who have better technology, maybe a better process, possibly more skilled laborers. And they'll obviously take advantage of economies of scale. So if you have quality and economies of scale, imagine the amount of volumes that you're now pushing out of your business. So suppliers will be investing more in research, investing a little bit more in development. And they stay top of product. So their quality becomes sort of like the top one in that specific industry. Like in the engineering division or engineering industry, you might have somebody who may be able to produce, or even in automotive, you may have a business that produces seats better, probably the steering wheel better, and probably the windscreens better. I'm just throwing out examples here. And then Toyota, for instance, will then get all of their products from the 3 different suppliers, because it just makes sense for that to be their core business and for them to produce mass scales or economies of scales and then supply it to an automotive or an OEM like Toyota. So this is just some of the examples of how you can go about, getting it done. Okay. Then we got drivers of making. So drivers of making is what then convinces a business for them to do it themselves and not outsource. And different businesses see it differently. And one of it is unreliable suppliers. So I think every business has gone down this road where they meet up with suppliers who just let them down consistently. So whether it means that your orders start arriving late, it's incomplete, maybe it's damaged, different businesses make specific parts different suppliers make specific parts for a particular business. If it's falling below that required level, they may be able to want to start making it in-house again. So having an unreliable supplier when your customer is crying for a specific product, you cannot say, oh, blame it on a supplier. You have to take it on for yourself. So it's making sure that you have reliable suppliers if you are going the outsource route, but making it yourself is because of unreliable suppliers. Okay, protection of proprietary technology. And I think this happens sometimes quite often than not, where businesses basically invest money in technology to improve their processes as much as possible. Therefore, it's necessary for them to protect any sort of proprietary technology that they have. So they may have maybe developed a specific equipment or technology or products or processes that needs to be protected in the case of competitive advantage. So instead of them having to, share that technology or share that proprietary technology with somebody that is a supplier, they choose to protect it themselves so that the supplier doesn't start supplying the same product to various different organizations. So trying to protect it can help with making it yourself. The next one is design secrecy. So it only happens with like a small amount of firms where they make particular parts primarily because they want to keep it a secret, certain elements a secret. Whether it's part of their design process or their manufacturing process, if there's something that's really innovative within their process and it's a secret, it's like KFC, okay? The recipe is a secret. Isn't the kernel recipe apparently a secret? So they wouldn't necessarily outsource that to somebody else. They would be making it in-house. I don't know if you watch, I'll give you another example. It's probably a very figurative example, but it's in SpongeBob, like the Krabby Patty. Okay, Mr. Krabs doesn't want to share his secret Krabby Patty recipe to Mr. Plankton, so therefore he decides to keep it himself, and he now makes his Krabby Patties in-house. So it's having that sort of design secrecy. You can also see that I have kids because I know this information. Okay. Using existing idle capacity. So basically, it's a short-term solution for a lot of businesses who have excess idle capacity. So they want to use that excess capacity to make some of its components. So whether it is you have decided to, let's say, shut down a department or a particular branch, and you now have laborers that you are probably going to go a Section 189, so retrenchment with them. You now have, let's say, 10 people, so you decide to maybe insource a specific process or a function within your business that you previously outsourced because you do not want to get rid of particular staff. You've done the cost analysis and the financials around it, and it makes sense for you to keep the 10 employees and manufacture it in-house, and you'll be saving hundreds of thousands of rands. So it's using that, different elements of understanding why you should be insourcing an item as opposed to outsourcing it. Okay. The next one is a lack of competent suppliers, and I think it speaks a lot to having unreliable suppliers as well. So if the component, for instance, does not exist, or the suppliers don't have the ability or the capacity or the capability to produce it, it may leave a business basically with no choice but to insource it or to make it themselves, even if it's from a short-term sort of period. And then the last one is better quality control. So if your business is capable enough to make it themselves, it allows for direct control over design, over manufacturing, over labor inputs, all of these wonderful things that comes with processing, so that you can get a high performance or a high quality component built in your business. Sometimes suppliers may have better technology and processes, but you can sometimes just be in control of the process from a quality perspective if you now move it in-house and you insource it. Okay, so there's a lot of pros and cons with taking something outsourced, or outsourcing an item or component as opposed to making it yourself. But it's always nice to weigh those options out. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Is it going to cost you more money? Are you going to be inefficient? Are you not going to have competitive advantage? These are sort of the questions you need to ask when you are in business and you are tasked with doing, something from a strategic sourcing perspective, or whether it's just, understanding who your suppliers are in the market, and whether you should go with them or you should maybe just look at spending a little bit more money and insourcing it for yourself. Okay, So the next one is supplier selection. And basically, it sums up the different factors for you to consider when you are supplying or selecting a supplier itself. And it's a lot from a repetitive perspective from the last 2 slides that we did, but it's looking at, you know, technology and the process technologies, you know, whether you're willing to share that information, quality, cost, reliability, the capacity of suppliers, capacity of yourself, where are they located, do they have enough facilities, what is their service level. So just basically asking all of those questions allows for you to understand whether you should go with that particular supplier or not. And we'll go into it a little bit more in detail. So the next one is basically some of your, like to say like KPIs, so your key performance indicators or your supplier selection indicators and metrics that you should be looking at when you are choosing a particular supplier. So in the workplace itself and in business, KPIs is fundamentally the most important thing. Data is king, and having this sort of information is what drives a business to making a particular decision. So when you have a supplier on board, you need to be running regular KPIs with them. So on a monthly basis or even a bi-monthly basis, you pull them into your boardroom and you say, okay, show me what you've done for me in the last 2 weeks or the last month. And based on this, you're then able to understand whether the supplier is a right fit for your business or if he or she is not a right fit for your business. And a lot of things is a lot of information that a supplier can provide within KPIs is information that can help you to drive your business forward. For instance, if we speak on it from a logistics perspective, let's say you're an e-commerce business and you now get your orders in, you know, sporadically over the course of the month. So beginning, end of the month, it's now high volumes, mid-month, no one has money, so they're not now buying off your website. When you have a KPI meeting with your logistics provider, they're able to show you where your peaks are and where your troughs are. They're able to understand what you are paying per shipment that you're now sending out to a customer, to a particular area. So you now can understand where the most amount of your volume is sitting. Maybe you need to hike up marketing or slow marketing down in that particular area. So it allows a business to make a lot of fundamentally good decisions, for them to develop a strategy to take the business into the next level. But basically, this is how you sort of monitor it from a KPI perspective. So the first one is cost factors. So understanding where you're sitting at from a price competitiveness, you know, where's your supplier's pricing, comparing it to the market or comparing it to their competitors. You need to understand it from that side. Your total cost of ownership, which we've already spoken about. So having all of your associated, whether it's associated costs, whether it's your shipping, your handling costs, your transport costs, your duties, or just a life cycle cost, understanding, you know, if you're forecasting something for demand, how long is it now sitting in the warehouse? Because you know, that is actually cash tied into that specific product. So you need to sell it as quickly as possible. So just understanding it from that side. And then we also spoke about payment terms. So the flexibility, the favorability when it comes to payment terms for your offered by your suppliers. The next one is quality factors. So the first is understanding what their product quality is. So you need a supplier that's going to be consistent. They need to be reliable. And it's measured through various options. It can be the defect rate on a particular product or how they adhere to specifications that you've requested for as a customer of theirs. So that's the first one. The next one is any sort of certifications. Are they adhering to quality standards? Is it like, you know, do they have an ISO 9001 accreditation or any other sort of relevant industry accreditations? If your business ethics or sort of mission and motto and vision and goals is sustainability? Are they also pushing sustainability from their perspective? What is their recycling plan? What is their green logistics plan? So just understanding from that side when it comes to certifications. And then also inspection and testing. Is the product going through extensive quality control processes? And are they sharing this information with you on what their quality control processes are? Then from a delivery perspective, you need to understand what is on-time delivery performance. So is the supplier able to meet the delivery schedules or the delivery timelines consistently? I mean, if they're giving you 99.5% sure, that's good. But if they're giving you, 60, 70, even 80%, I mean, that's not a great SLA at all. Even 90% is not a great SLA, especially if you're moving volumes, 10% of 100,000 is quite a bit. And that's almost a thousand customers that is now complaining to you. So understanding it from that perspective is very important. Lead time, what does it take for the supplier to deliver your goods after your order is placed? So if you're saying on your website that after you place an order with me, you will get your delivery in 5 days, but it takes 2 days for production and your logistics provider now has 3 days to deliver it. Is the logistics provider delivering it in 3 days, or are they not delivering it in 5 days? Because then your customer needs to wait almost 7 days for their product. So understanding it from that perspective. And then flexibility. Can your supplier accommodate any sort of changes, whether it is quantity? So when you change something within your business scope and your business strategy, and you now had a boost in volume, let's say you ran a 40% sale, and you now have 50% more volume than anticipated, can your delivery partner accommodate those changes and accommodate that volume? So it's basically understanding it from that side. And then you have capacity and capability. So from a production capacity side, is your supplier able to meet your current requirements from a volume side or any sort of future requirements? And then there's from a technical side, if you have any innovation ideas, can your supplier then innovate within their processes to accommodate you? And then do they also have the resources that's available? Is it skilled laborers? Is it good enough material? Is it high-end technology? All of the resources required for production and for the process to continue. Then we move on to financial stability. So it's basically understanding the financial health of the supplier. So you want to deal with the supplier that is stable and doesn't want to close their doors tomorrow, and they're now sitting with all of your cash and they've gone into business rescue and you're now not getting your product, nor are you getting your money back. So it's understanding what their financial statements are, what is their credit ratings, and any sort of other indicators. So a lot of times, like even if you have to go with the supplier, and you basically paying them, at the end of the day, you still need to understand whether that supplier is going to end up in the news, and so with all of their customers. So just understanding and having a holistic review of who your suppliers are, and is their health check done, financial health check done. Then we have compliance and risk management. So from a compliance perspective, are they going through the normal change like an environmental compliance, safety compliance? Are they going through labor laws? Are they paying the laborers minimum wage? Or are they going bare minimum wage? So it's, are they complying with the normal rules and regulations of the specific country that you're in? And then from a risk side, to identify and assess and also mitigate any sort of risk, whether it is economic instabilities, anything from a supply chain disruption side. So that becomes a huge factor in selecting a supplier. Then we have sustainability and corporate social responsibility. So sustainability, any from an environmental, you want your supplier to be using maybe eco-friendly items, eco-friendly materials, and also their process to be as sustainable as possible. And from a corporate social responsibility side, you want your supplier to engage with social initiatives, anything to do with community development, or whether there's a campaign that's running, you want them to be involved. You want to link yourself with a supplier that is present. Innovation and continuous improvement. So from an innovation perspective, you want them to offer improved products, improved processes. By having regular KPIs with them, they will definitely be an open discussion, especially if it's happening quite often, where you would see, let's pull it into a logistics space, but let's say, for instance, you're seeing that majority of their products are moving and it's 50 kgs, and you've got them on as a supplier, I've got them on a rate that is for 5 kgs. I can find an innovative way to bring them up to 50 kgs that can be a lot more efficient for them. It can be cost effective, can save them money, and also it gives me a lot more credibility as a supplier, because I'm sharing this information with them without them coming to me and saying, I'm doing something that's zero-based budgeting and I need to cut costs and I need you to reduce your rate by 10%. It allows for the conversation to be a lot better when the supplier sees the innovation and introduces it to the customer. Because when you go in the next time and ask for the price increase, your customer, as a supplier, your customer then is a lot more willing to go down that route with you and have that conversation. Okay, then relationship management, what we've spoken about before, just having open communication and transparency between the customer and the supplier. Being a good fit, culturally having the same values, just allowing for the information to travel between the two parties is probably one of the most important criteria. And then the last one is geographical considerations. So understanding where you sit and where your supplier sits, because a lot of times it can impact you from a lead time perspective, logistics cost perspective, and also to communicate. It's not very easy to communicate when you are now sitting, 1,000 kilometers away from each other. So, and also to transport your products to and forth, it can be very costly. So understanding where your supplier is sitting and how best you can maximize the role from there. Okay. Then we move on to supplier base. And supplier base is basically, it's a list of suppliers that a business uses to acquire your materials, your services, supplies, and equipment from. So this is a list that procurement would generally draft up. A lot of times they use automated systems, like for instance, through SAP, they would use a system called Ariba, where they would onboard suppliers based on the criteria that we've ticked, so the different KPIs. Once we've ticked all of those KPIs, we then onboard a supplier onto a system. There's not many, your smaller businesses will go very manual using, this supplier-based approach, but bigger organizations and more global organizations use very automated systems where you can create an order, it goes through the various approval processes, and then your supplier is then paid in whatever payment terms was agreed upon. So the first one is your single sourcing. And basically single sourcing is, there's different reasons for single sourcing. And it's like you're using basically one supplier to, one supplier for that specific item. Multiple suppliers means you are horse trading between 3 different people that can give you one item, and you're probably using it from, we'll go through the reasons. But single sourcing means having one supplier. And one of the reasons or the advantages of doing single sourcing is you're able to form a good relationship, because you're now dealing with one person or one supplier, and you can then have a very mutually beneficial strategic relationship with each other. You have less quality issues, using the same technology, they're using the same processes to produce the parts that you require. So the quality may vary, but it varies very slightly. So you have very little quality variability. Lower costs, if you're buying from one supplier, you have economies of scale, so you have a lower purchase cost per unit. So single sourcing basically also avoids duplicate like fixed costs, especially if your component or your product uses expensive material, etc. So having a single supplier allows you to have lower cost per product. Transport economics. So having a single sourcer basically concentrates all of your volume into one. So a business can basically take advantage of having full truckloads. Imagine having 3 different suppliers and you now need to transport from 3 different suppliers, and it's maybe like, 1 ton, 1 ton, 1 ton. You now have to pay from different areas for that 1 ton each of product. Whereas if you're using one specific supplier, you can get a 4-ton vehicle to pick up from one supplier and come back, and that's one sort of logistics cost at a lower rate. Proprietary product or process purchases. And this is basically if the supplier holds a patent for a particular item or product, the business has basically no choice but to buy from this sole source. So I know it happens with various brands, like bigger brands that we know in South Africa, where they have a patent to only buy from their supplier in like the UK or USA. They cannot vary their sourcing from different suppliers. Like they can't go to a cheapest country to do manufacturing of a product because the patent is held with the head office in UK or the USA. And then the last one is your volume is too small to basically split. So if your requirement is very small, it's not worthwhile for you to split the orders amongst various or multiple suppliers. So single sourcing is basically the first or the only approach for acquiring your product. The next one is multiple sourcing. And this means obviously when you have multiple suppliers for a particular reason. And the first one is the need for capacity. So this is when your demand exceeds the capacity of a single supplier. You have no choice but to look for multiple sources of it. So if your supplier is used to doing 100 units of a product and you now have a demand for 500 units, unfortunately, you have to go and look for other suppliers that can do the volumes of the balance of the 400. So when you need excess in capacity, you need to look for other suppliers. The next one is spreading the risk of supply chain interruption. So multiple sources allows for business to spread the risk amongst various suppliers for whatever reason, whether it means that your supplier has laborers that end up going on strike, for instance. You cannot get your product out of them because there's nobody to produce your product. So by spreading the risk over to multiple suppliers, you are able to not have any disruption in your supply chain. I know like previously, like within the logistics industry, there was a logistics provider that had closed during COVID for like 4 to 5 days because a lot of the staff within the business had gotten COVID. So it just didn't make any sense for the business to continue going and for the COVID to basically spread amongst everybody. So they decided to shut down for a few days. As customers of that logistics provider, they were basically left destitute because everything went to a main hub, and that main hub is the one that closed down. And if they're not accepting or they're not sending out any deliveries of any shipments, there was no way for anybody to get what they required. So that forced the decisions for a lot of customers to be looking at multiple suppliers. So just basically not keeping all your eggs in one basket so that you still have business continuity at the end of the day. All right, the next one is creating competition. So basically by you using multiple sources, it encourages competition amongst the suppliers in terms of pricing, in terms of the quality. If you have to look at like modern day, it discourages the use of using multiple suppliers to create competition, but it's still a preferred approach when you have non-vital items. Like if it's not your core business, it makes sense for you to supply it out, and using or leveraging the suppliers against each other is not the best option, but it's what a lot of businesses use because at the end of the day, their business process is to cut down costs as much as possible and to improve their quality. So they will horse trade between suppliers to create competition. And then we have the last one, which is multiple suppliers usually have more information, especially when it comes to what the market is and how the market conditions are going, if there is any new product development. So remember, different suppliers work differently. So a supplier A, for instance, may look at everything from a local perspective. Whatever orders he gets from customers, he produces it and he moves forward. Supplier B may go into different countries, maybe a developing country or a developed country, and may look at different innovative ways of doing things. He may come up with brand new ideas of how to do things quicker, faster, at a better price. And it just makes sense for him to, introduce that through to his customers. So it does allow, or it does benefit you to look at multiple suppliers if that's the case, because all you know, if you're going single sourcing, all you know is what your supplier is telling you. But if you have multiple sourcing, what you know is the information you're getting from multiple suppliers within the industry. And that basically is what strategic, from a sourcing perspective, what it is. It's quite a complicated process if you look at it, because it involves a lot of unrelated tasks, but it's unrelated tasks that a procurement team or a procurement manager should have an understanding of what to do or how to do it. And it relates directly into your supply chain so that new information is gathered. The business is able to use as much of that information to allow for their purchasing power to be at its maximum, and get the best value that it can from the marketplace. So strategic sourcing is a very, very important component when we look at it from a supply chain management perspective, because it's something that allows for a business to develop and grow, because you are as good as what your suppliers give you. If you're going to have bad service from your supplier, you're going to give bad service to your customer at the end of the day. Okay, and then we're moving on to our last
question. Sorry.
Yes.
So on the cost saving of single supplier, right? Can't that play a role in multiple suppliers as well? Because creating competition at the end goal is to get a cheaper price.
Yes, absolutely. So single sourcing, why the cost factor comes into play with that is because you're now pushing all of your volume to one supplier. So by you pushing all of your volume in, you get economies of scale, whether it's from a manufacturing perspective or if it's from a transport perspective. So the more volume you give somebody, the better your price is per item. Multiple ways, so where costing can help you from a multiple supplier perspective is you can horse trade between suppliers. So if supplier A gives you 100 Rand, you can go to supplier B and say, I've got it for 100 Rand from supplier A, can you do it for 95 Rand? So which is not the credible thing to do, but it's what a lot of businesses are currently doing.
Okay, so if there's a question asked, like for instance, a test, and it says, okay, for cost saving, and they give both, I must still go single supplier, right?
Single supplier all the way because of economies of scale. If you're splitting your volume across 3-4 different suppliers, it's guaranteed that you are going to horse trade at the end of the day, and you are probably not going to get the best benefit because you're not funneling all of your volume through them if it's multiple suppliers. But single suppliers, it's 1,000 shipments going to one supplier. He's giving you a better rand per kg or a better rand for the full product.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool, no problem. And then the next one, or the last one, is basically your sourcing process. So this is your strategic sourcing process. When you see your ICE task, this is what is your ICE task, basically. Okay, I should not have given you this hint, but I want to help you as much as I possibly can. Your ICE task is based on a case study. Your case study is asking you to basically tell them, based on the information that's given to you, please do your sourcing process for this particular customer. So firstly, it's understanding or identifying the needs of the customer. What do they need from this specific process? Do they need to cut their costs down? Do they need to improve their quality? Whatever that question is, you need to find it in the case study. Define or reevaluate what the user's requirements are. So you need to understand what is the requirements from the business, and you need to put that there. You decide whether you need to make it or buy it. Are you going to outsource it or are you going to insource it? Remember, it's information that you can use from the case study, but it's also information that I would like for you to think out of the box. I don't think there's going to be any wrong answer here. It's who can be the most innovative as possible. Identify the different types of purchases, conduct your market analysis, identify your suppliers based on that market analysis. All of this is stemming from what your needs are, remember? Pre-screen your suppliers, evaluate your supplier base, choose who your suppliers are going to be, and then you deliver that product, and post-purchase meaning your KPI session thereafter. I don't expect you to be doing 5 pages of anything, but I want to see at least 500 words of how you can understand the sourcing process. So everything that we've discussed today, it's all basically in here, in this one slide. Okay, and it's how you're going to interpret or apply what you've seen from the case study into this sourcing process. Okay. Is there any questions so far?
All good.
All good. Okay, cool. Perfect. So after this session, your ICE task is going to be released at 7 p.m. I will be posting these slides under your announcements. The recordings are taking almost 24 hours for this to be downloaded. So hopefully by tomorrow morning, your recording can be downloaded and I can share this with everybody. But so far, so good. My advice today, go and download your assignment 1 and keep that. Go and do your ICE task. So start your ICE task and then slowly start your assignment. You have until the 2nd, I think it's the 2nd of April that is due. We still have, I think it's Learning Unit Theme 3, Learning Unit 2 next week, which will be a pre-recorded session. And then we have Theme 3 after that. And I think after that session, which will not next week, the week after, you will have more information to basically do your assignment. But if you go and look at your assignment, you will see a lot of the information that we've covered over the last 2-3 weeks, including today, will be already covered there. Yes, Lee, how can I help?
Hi there.
Hi.
This is not anything specific to the course or module, but it is regarding the assignment.
Okay.
So I am someone who likes to have a formal copy, and I've asked, is it any way possible that I could print it? So I just wanted to find out from you, because they said I couldn't, but I wanted to know if
I really don't think so. So even I can't print it. It's the way that the assignments are being shared on the student material. Sometimes it's not even allowing me specifically to download it into Word. So I don't know if it's just my laptop being super slow and not allowing for that to happen. But yeah, I don't think that it's printable. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I was able to download it to my laptop. So if it's
Okay.
allowed, I'll send the PDF on the group if it's allowed.
That would be great. Okay.
Okay, thank you, man.
If you can do that, Bernard, I would appreciate you sharing it with the group because I myself can't download it to Word. So Lee,
yeah.
I think maybe wait for Bernard, but I don't think that it's printable. I'm not sure if it is.
Yeah, I'll try.
Okay, thank you. Lee, does that answer your question? Does that help you?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shlan Kanipo. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. Yes, hello.
Just put this on, it's fine.
Yes.
My question is, do we have a specific textbook for this module?
Yes, you do have a specific textbook for this module. If you look in your MO, so your module outline, you will find your textbook there. I can tell you out loud what's the name of the textbook because I have it here in front of me.
Okay.
And that is Fundamental Principles of Supply Chain Management, Samson Mbaje and Johanna Lunga.
Okay.
I can shade on the WhatsApp group with you. Maybe take a picture of the textbook that I have, if that helps.
Yeah, thanks, I will.
Okay, sure, no problem. Please, everybody, make sure you get the textbook. This is not a module that you can just hope and pray it goes well, and my lecture slides are going to help you. It is not going to help you. We do not have enough time together for us to physically go over every single content. We only have 12 contact sessions. I actually think it's less than 12 contact sessions, and I am doing recordings every second week. It is not a requirement, but I cannot cover all of the content in our contact sessions. Therefore, I'm doing pre-recorded sessions for you to cover as much as I possibly can. Okay, so get the textbook, even if it's an ebook. I did hear, though, I think from one of my other classes, that the ebook is the same price as the hard copy textbook. So whatever makes financial sense for you, please go ahead and do that. Sophie, how can I help?
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I have the same textbook you spoke about. Maybe I missed something, but the content we're doing today are about sourcing. Is it under chapter 1 or chapter 2? Because I'm busy trying to search sourcing and I can't see. Maybe I
Chapter
missed
3.
it, but I just want to what you were teaching to reference it to where it is in the textbook.
Chapter 3. So it is, yes, it's in chapter 3, and it is under the PACER that I've shared with you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So if you go to your announcements, your PACER is there. I think it's now under volume 2 PACER.
Okay.
You will
Okay.
see that I've got the learning unit that I'm covering for a particular lecture, as well
Okay.
as the chapter that it
Okay.
falls in.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. I was just getting confused with LU2 and LU what.
Yes.
So when it says LU2, I thought it's under chapter 2.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. No problem at all. Is there any other questions that anybody has?
I do have a question.
Yes.
But it's not based on what we learned today. I just want to ask you, what do you understand about the rebates?
The rebate?
Yeah, what's your understanding about the rebates?
What rebate?
For purchases, let's say maybe the supplier, you purchase from the supplier, the kickback
yes.
that you get from the supplier.
Okay, yes, okay. So, I mean, a lot of suppliers use that as either if you pay early, like a settlement.
Yes.
So if you, for instance, like if you just say, for instance, your payment terms with the specific supplier is like 30 days and you pay them in 7 days or 20 days or whatever it is, you end up with a rebate or a settlement. It does work if your business is very controlled by the financial aspect of it, where cash flow is a bit of a problem, and your rebate can be really low. 0.5%, 0.2%, 1%. It doesn't need to be like a double digit. So it does help in various industries or businesses, and especially if you want to push from a financial perspective and increase your cash flow.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Rishabh, how can I help?
Ma'am, I would just like to confirm that the ICE task is due on the 12th of March, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. So it is due on the 12th of March, but it is a very soft deadline, meaning that I would like you to do it on the 12th of March, but there will be a harder deadline as we go through the semester. The problem is, and I've seen this before with different modules previously, is students leave ICE tasks for the end, and that's when it comes to exam preparation and you cannot do the ICE task. Remember, ICE tasks count for 10% of your CAS, so you need to do your ICE tasks, okay? So follow the deadlines. The deadlines are there for you to help you because it only helps contribute towards your assignment from a knowledge perspective, okay? Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Next week, we'll have a pre-recorded session. If you have not already sent me a message to get onto our WhatsApp group, please do so. I'm going to pop my number in the chat box quickly, and you can just maybe just share your number or drop me a message. I'll add you on there because there's a lot of nice discussions with the students. You know, if somebody's confused, there's always people that's helping. Thank you.
Thanks, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.